Hello, everybody. All right, today is, of course, Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. Welcome to another edition of the Mikestand. And, of course, a friendly reminder to everybody if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, always feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in. Before we get started, we do have a few things over tonight. Let's see. But as I said, want to give people a chance to get in here. So if you can help out by, as I said, liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Life is like a hurricane in Duckburg. Race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a duck blur. Might solve a mystery to rewrite history. DuckTales. Woo. You've been waiting, I've been waiting. DuckTales. Woo. You've been waiting, I've been waiting. DuckTales. And it's a stranger out to find you. Would you grab onto some ducktails? Ooh, you've been waiting, I've been waiting, ducktails. Ooh, you've been waiting, I've been waiting, ducktails. And it's a stranger out to find you. Would you grab onto some ducktails? Ooh, you've been waiting, I've been waiting, ducktails. Ooh, you've been waiting, I've been waiting, DuckTales. Ooh. Just trying to get some last minute um invites out, as it were. Invite people to come check out the show here before we get started. Hopefully everybody's had a good week this week. Hopefully you're all looking forward to the weekend here. Let's see now. So yeah, we're coming up on 3.5 minutes, so I guess I go ahead and talk about what's on tap for tonight. So I do have initially it was going to be two, but I think we were able to add a third because one happened to pop up, since I chose stuff earlier. So we got three articles we're going to probably look at: two from Me TV Tunes, and then one from Bounding into Comics. Of course, going to look back on a couple profile pieces. According to one animator, you couldn't control Mel Blanc. We're going to look at that. And also, I guess there was a point in time when you go back to the original Captain Planet, there was a consideration that they're going to have Tom Cruise actually providing the voice of Captain Planet. Could you imagine hearing Tom Cruise go, "The planet is yours"? And then we're gonna wrap the news section of the broadcast, of course, up with an article on Bounding into Comics, following up on a story we've been following recently over the past month or so, in which kind of the back and forth going on between Marvel Comics and their fans over the whole bringing, whether or not to bring Peter and Mary Jane back together in the main universe. Also, we'll have, of course, the wrestling wrap up will be, of course, looking back to last night's Dynamite, looking ahead to tonight's Impact, and Ring of Honor shows. We've got some WWE news that just came out today as well. Of course, with last night's Dynamite, that's the Go Home Dynamite before this Sunday's pay-per-view, and look at what's all going down there. And then we'll finish things off, of course, with this day in each history. So let's see. Well, we're past the 5.5 minute mark now, getting close to 6 minutes here. So why don't we go ahead and get started on the articles here. Let me pull it up. Oh, there we go with that. Let's see, so we've got that all up now. Well, let's take a look at this. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So, one Warner Brothers animator said that, quote, nobody could control Mel Blanc, unquote. Quote, even Mel Blanc couldn't control Mel Blanc, unquote. Okay, that sounds kind of funny. Article posted on April 22nd, 2025 by MeTV and staff. All right, so there's Mel Blanc right there. All right, so let's see what they have to say about this. What's going on here? So, no matter how much fun you could possibly have in your life, it might pain you to admit that you will never have as much fun as Mel Blanc. Maybe, maybe not. But anyways, better known as the man of 1,000 voices, will be the first to say that if anyone deserves to have a good time, it's Mel Blanc. Blanc was responsible for countless numbers of various characters, various favorite cartoon voices, including Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Yosemite Sam. But Blanc didn't just work hard, he also played hard. The voice actor loved his work, and he had a wonderful time doing it. Just ask his coworkers. And of course, we know that, he's known primarily for his Warner Brothers work, but also he, of course, before signing his exclusive contract with Warner Brothers, and I think it was in 1941 or 42, he was also the original voice of Woody. He was the very first voice of Woody Woodpecker for like 3 shorts, and his voice was used for the intro throughout the 40s, the Woody Woodpecker cartoons. And then he would, of course, go on to work with Warner Brothers as well, working, among other characters, of course. I think Barney Rubble. I think he also did Mr. Spacely and the Jetsons. So, anyways, let's see. Quote, Mel Blanc had more fun than any of us, unquote, said Fritz Frayling, a Warner Brothers animator, during an interview with the Record Journal. Quote, nobody could control Mel Blanc back then. Even Mel Blanc couldn't control Mel Blanc. Don't you know guys know people like that, right? They just seem so wacky that, no one, even themselves, can't really control them. Anyways, of course, originally Warner Brothers kept their Looney Tunes characters few and far between, but with hard work, they were able to increase their popularity by adding new characters. Not only did this keep their content fresh, it also endeared viewers to the characters. Quote, by increasing the number of characters, we broadened our appeal, unquote, said Frayling. Quote, there was something for everybody, unquote. But it's kind of true. I mean, because obviously different characters are going to bring out different elements. Some characters might have, quote unquote, slightly more. Obviously, they couldn't have like super mature material, obviously, because the Hays Code and all that. But that maybe some of the humor, let's say a Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck cartoon might have been slightly more mature than, let's say, a the content in, let's say, a Tweety or Sniffles cartoon, right? So, of course, the universal appeal is precisely what has made the Looney Tunes so popular. Even today, quote, Warner Brothers cartoons are timeless, unquote, said film critic Leonard Maltin. Quote, you don't need to apologize for their age. They're just as good now as they were when they were first made, unquote. Yes, because a lot of them, when they were first made, particularly in the late 30s, early 40s, were at times when people didn't need to be reminded of all the bad stuff going on in the world. They needed an escape, and of course, Hollywood, provided that it's Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers, MGM, Paramount, Columbia, Universal, United Artists, 20th Century Fox, even RKO and Celebrity, they all provided that kind of getaway from all the bad that was going on in the world at the time of the 30s and 40s. So all right, so that one kind of went quickly. So now let's move on to the next article here. This one might interest some people, of course. Going back to some of your childhood. I was actually, by the time this cartoon came out, I was already just about out of high school when this cartoon came out. Actually, no, I was actually in the midst of high school when this cartoon came out, because I think it came out in 90, actually, now that I think about it. I think in 93 originally, but Tom Cruise was supposed to be Captain Planet. Imagine Tom Cruise saying, "The power is yours." Article posted on April 3rd by TV Toon staff. So now the guy who did get the role of Captain Planet was David Coburn. All right. But I guess we'll get into it here in a moment. Tom Cruise, they were looking at Tom Cruise to go ahead and do the voice of Captain Planet. Let's see what happened. Let's see. They're saying he was supposed to, so I guess something must have happened that kept him from. Now, as many of you probably remember, of course, a number of big name actors lent their, some pretty well known voice actors at the time, as well as some pretty well known regular actors, among. But anyways, let's get into the article here. Captain Planet and the Planeteers has no shortage of celebrities in its cast. Whoopi Goldberg, who of course did Gaia in it. LeVar Burton, who did Kwame. Sting, Meg Ryan, Tim Curry, Jeff Goldblum, Ed Asner, and Martin Sheen all voiced regular characters in the series. But the titular role was meant for and coveted by the King of Hollywood, Tom Cruise. King of Hollywood, huh? Did he give himself that name, or did somebody else give him that name? Sounds kind of over the top, isn't it? Well, if he gave himself it sounds pretty conceited. But anyways, so continuing on with the article here. So according to Marcia Goodman, casting and voice director for the show, Cruise didn't even audition. In a podcast interview with Slate, Goodman said, quote, my coworker got a call and the person said, quote, hi, I'm Tom Cruise. I'd like to do the voice of Captain Planet, unsmall quote. And she said, quote, "Yeah, sure," unquote, and she hung up. Yeah, you get a random call like that, you're liable to think it's just a prank or something. Um, Not one to be deterred, Cruise called back and said, quote, "No, this is really Tom Cruise," unquote. Oh boy, wonder how long this runaround is gonna go. I guess we'll find out. It made sense to give Cruise the part. This was 1989, and his star was rising higher than ever. So 1989 is probably when they were like casting and doing the recordings for, I guess, a 1990 premiere. Imagine how impactful it would have been to have the biggest celebrity in Hollywood leading the cast of a show about saving the environment. He met with the production team while he was filming Days of Thunder, even taking a helicopter to get to meetings. Wow! Talk about commitment. Hmm. And again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, as we continue on here, so let's see. Tom Cruise began recording sessions as Captain Planet and recorded the first 6 episodes, but hit a snag. Quote, "Tom Cruise was fine, but he just couldn't keep up with our schedule," unquote, said Goodman. Quote, "He had other priorities like being a movie star," unquote. "The realities of being Hollywood's hottest commodity had set in, and sadly, Tom Cruise had to withdraw from the project. What began as one big step forward for the fledgling show was now 6 steps back. They needed a new voice for Captain Planet, and that voice had to re-record Tom Cruise's episodes." Yeah, that's usually what happens. I mean, it's like that would have probably even upset fans even more. 6 episodes, you're hearing Tom Cruise's voice, and you're hearing this other guy named David Coburn's voice. Might as well just have Coburn just do all of it, re-record. Luckily, Goodman found her Captain Planet with up-and-coming actor David Coburn, who voiced the role in 113 episodes. But it's still fun to imagine how different the show would be if Tom Cruise had been Captain Planet. That would have been interesting, I guess. Well, if there's any Captain Planet fans out there, tell me, do you think it would have impacted your enjoyment of the show if if Tom Cruise was, would you liked it more, or would you liked it less if it was Tom Cruise and not Dave Coburn? Just something to ponder there, right? Anyways, so now that we got through the 2 articles from MeTV, let's go ahead and wait. What am I doing? Not that. Let's go over to Bounding into Comics. So there is an article that did catch my attention earlier. Of course, it's kind of a follow up to it's kind of the follow up to a story we've been following for the last, I don't know, month and a half or so, talking about how basically talking about how fans have been asking Marvel to bring Peter and Mary Jane back together. I mean, it got a little bit more distinct. We covered the story this is yesterday or the day before, in the last couple of days, where it's now going from, okay, we simply want to bring Peter and Mary Jane back together as a married couple in the main canon, to now we're tired of him always being depicted as a struggling high school, college student, um, for the umpteenth time. So, let's see what they have to say here. So, Marvel Comics continues to ignore fans. Confirms next in smaller parentheses here. Amazing Spider-Man run on smaller parentheses. Run will again focus on, quote, Peter as a young person, unquote. Article by Spencer McCooley, published April 1st, 2025. I mean, again, I'm sure that the constant regurgitation, I mean, it's one thing for like something like Looney Tunes or Woody Woodpecker to really, be stuck doing the same thing for 40, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, but having a character like Spider-Man with a little more meat in there, probably not all that endearing to people. But anyways, particularly in the comics. So let's get into this one now. And again, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. I'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, in continuing to double down on the publisher's at this stage unhealthy obsession with the idea that the wall crawler must never in italics there, I guess, ever be allowed to grow up, Marvel Comics writer Joe Kelly has confirmed that rather than looking to the future and allowing the hero to undergo any significant character development, his upcoming Amazing Spider-Man run will instead focus on exploring Peter Parker's early teenage years. Of course it will, because that seems to be their... I mean, it's kind of, it's always kind of funny here, because it's funny how these people who don't agree with them, they'll sit there and, with people who they don't agree with or who don't agree with them, they'll sit there and they'll call them all kinds of nasty names, including the P word, right? But you would think that with this constant obsession of keeping Peter Parker as a teenager, you almost get the impression that whenever they call somebody else the P word, is it just some form of self-deflection almost? Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of wonder, right? It's like, no, we can't have him grow up. He's got to be a Toys R Us kid. But it's funny how they will throw out certain words for people that they don't like or they really don't agree with, and yet, again, there's another example of them actually behaving in the way that they accuse others of behaving, right? So, just a thought. Anyways, let's go on with the article here. So, Kelly, who readers may recognize as the Deadpool Volume 3 writer, who redefined the merc with a mouth from, quote, from smaller quotes, legitimately insane psychopath, unsmaller quote, to, in smaller quotes, humorous fourth wall breaker, unsmaller quote, provided this insight into his soon-to-start run on the Wall Crawler's core book during a recent pre-release interview given to AIPT Comics David Brooke. Speaking to the narrative direction of his run, Kelly explained to his host that rather than focusing on retreading Spider-Man's well-known origin story or attempting to actually allow him to thrive in the here and now, his follow-up to his 8 Deaths of Spider-Man arc would instead focus on a lesser trodden path, the hero's life, his pre-superhero years. Really? You mean talking about his life before the spider bit him? Now, normally that might be considered an interesting sidebar if they hadn't been doing this stuff over and over and over and over again. But quote, I'm sort of fascinated with Peter as a young person, like pre-high school. Unquote, the writer told us. Really? Really? I almost wonder if Joe Kelly was one of these guys who like sat there and call other people the P word. Quote, because we haven't really spent any time with him at that time period. And I feel like we get a lot of our hand uh, hard wiring at that age, unquote. Quote, you hit that age where you're like 13, 14, and you start processing things differently, unquote. He continued, quote, he lost his parents when he was younger, but what does that really mean to him as an adolescent? Does he act out? Is he more reserved? We always see him as a nerdy kid, but was he angry? Because when I go back and read those early books, Peter was mad a lot, unquote. Well, he also had a pretty sharp tongue, too, at times. While Kelly may hold some level of genuine interest in exploring Peter's pre-Spider-Man life, as admittingly this period hasn't seen a lot of attention, which I guess you could argue that is true. I mean, when Stan Lee and Steve Ditko introduced Spider-Man back in the early 60s he was, I think, at the very youngest, he might have been like a senior in high school. Senior in high school working part-time as a freelance photographer, for the Daily Bugle. I mean, obviously, in some of his earlier animated interpretations, whether it be the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon done by Grant Way Lawrence, or the early 80s of Spider-Man and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, or even the 90s there with Spider-Man the Animated Series, they generally depicted him as a college student, somewhere in that maybe 18 to 20 range, Now, of course, in Spider-Man the Animated Series, they did eventually move the story forward to where he and Mary Jane were about to get married, and then things happened. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. But so particularly with how they played a particular angle there, as compared to an angle from the comic book stories. All right, so continuing on here then. The choice to have Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7 go thematically in quote, a smaller quote here, back in time, represents yet another attempt by Marvel Comics to push their aforementioned belief that, quote, Spider-Man is about youth, unquote. Quote, what made Amazing Spider-Man the flagship of the Marvel line was the soap opera aspect of Peter's life. The fact that he was a young character, a character who could screw up, a character that life seemed to occasionally dump on in humorous ways. Actually, though, there'd be more of a soap opera aspect to. I mean, if they're trying to say, oh, well, he can only have a soap opera aspect to his life if he's just perpetually a youth, which I think most people would tell you is baloney. If anything, you actually would get more of the soap opera aspect of it, probably from him being married and dealing with adult situations. But, these people probably have a few screws loose or a few brain cells missing for all we know, right? Let's see. And yet would keep on striving to do right by everybody, unquote. Explained then Spider editor and current Marvel Comics executive editor Tom Brevoort of the publisher's small quote, post one more day, rules for the character, as seen in the back of the Storylines Collected Editions. Quote, an everyman, a schlemiel, grounded in the real world, grounded in Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn. No, not grounded in the real world, because grounded in the real world would have him growing up and becoming an adult and being married. I mean, the natural progression of things would be Peter, living his life normally, growing up, getting married, his, raising children. Maybe his, I don't know if his, kids would, if genetically they'd pick up their father's abilities or not, but maybe even them getting into, as the Spider Kids or something like that. And here are some panels. Peter Parker is on the job hunt in Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 1, number 546, Brand New Day, 2008, with Stan Slott and Steve McNiven and all that. So, quote, Spider-Man doesn't grow up, unquote, he continued. Quote, he doesn't get a 9-to-5 job, parentheses, and couldn't hold it if he did get one, unparentheses. That would be somewhat, that could be somewhat of a problem. That could be somewhat of a problem if he had a 9-to-5 job, if he had to, in the middle of his workday, had to go off and save people. But the idea that J. Michael Krasinski set up with him teaching in his old school had its merits, but they never really got fleshed out and explored enough, and making Peter a teacher, unquote. And again, a friendly reminder to you guys, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So as we continue on with the article here, but sadly, despite the fact that Peter's high school era, in smaller quotes, and college years, smaller quotes, lasted for a collective total of 16 years, and barely make up a little over a fourth of the wall crawler's 63-year publication history. Following his debut in 1962, the hero graduated from Midtown High 3 years later in 195's Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, number 128, and received his undergraduate degree from Empire State University 10 years later in 1978's Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, number 185. Volume number 28. Okay. Practically everyone with any say in his handling, from the current Spider office to Bravort, still have made it abundantly clear that the Spider-Man equals youth. Hill is the one they will probably die on. Okay, clear that the Spider-Man equals youth. Hill is the one they will probably die on. To this end, Kelly closed out this time with Brooke by noting that while nothing is yet set in stone, he is currently hoping that his run with the web slinger will last a couple of years. Quote, "That's certainly the plan," he added. Unquote, he added. Quote, "If people are happy, then I'll keep chugging along," unquote. Quote, "It's not even a longevity thing to me," unquote. Kelly concluded, quote, "It's a potency effect. Did this story hit you? Cool. And hopefully you get a bunch of those in a row, and that makes a run," unquote. The first issue of Kelly's run on the relaunched Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, with art by John Romita Jr. and Pepe Larraz, is currently on track to swan dive onto shelves on April 9th. So let's see, 6 days from now. So this following Wednesday here. All right, so there we go with that one. Let me see, where are we at on time here? I think we're probably getting right around 39 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead now then, and I'm of course going to go ahead now and I'm going to go ahead now and move on to the wrestling wrap-up, because we do have quite a few things to go over, including some WE news that was announced today. So it does look like Rusev, known as Miro in AEW, has re-signed with the WWE. He was meeting with WWE officials today at their offices, and it's also been mentioned that Aiden English, who is currently TNA commentator Matthew Renwalt, has offered to kind of help work with Rusev again on the whole Rusev Day angle. That was popular. So Rusev, Malachi Black, and Ray Phoenix have all recently re-signed with the WWE. Ray Phoenix's return is coming up soon as well. But again, a lot of this will probably happen. after WrestleMania. So they can keep the focus. So they can keep a lot of the the highlights on headlights on WrestleMania. These returns will probably happen like after WrestleMania. Of course, is 2 weekends from this weekend. On the 19th and 20th. Also, some news. So the other day, Mick Foley was involved in a car accident. He seems to be doing okay. Was hospitalized for observation. He seems to be doing better from what's been said. So again, that's all we got on the WWE news. So now, as we'll go ahead and look back to last night's Dynamite. As last night's Dynamite was, of course, the Go Home Dynamite. Heading into this Sunday's Dynasty pay-per-view. And we'll take a quick peek at that. All right. So on last night's Dynamite, which of course came from the Peoria Civic Center in Peoria, Illinois, the show opened up with a mixed tornado tag team match in which Swerve Strickland, who is set to face Jon Moxley at this Sunday's Dynasty pay-per-view, teamed up with Willow Nightingale to take on the Death Riders, Jon Moxley and Marina Shafir, in which Strickland and Nightingale defeated Moxley and Shafir in a very brutal match that saw people get beat up pretty badly. After the match, kind of in a spoiled sport kind of moment, Jon Moxley attacked Willow Nightingale and ended up DDTing her, in which they had to end up taking her to the back and having her neck looked at. But and hopefully everybody hopes that she's okay after taking that DDT. So that opened up the show, of course. Then of course, there was a match between Toni Storm and Penelope Ford, as this was Toni Storm's tune-up match before her AEW Women's World Title defense this Sunday at Dynasty against Megan Bayne, in which Toni Storm did defeat Penelope Ford in 8 minutes 13 seconds. Some interesting things happened during the match, including apparently Toni Storm biting the tongue of Penelope Ford. She was biting the tongue, which was kind of interesting. But towards the end of the match, of course, Storm hit the Storm Zero, that kind of package pile driver on Penelope Ford, getting the pin, only to be confronted afterwards by her Dynasty opponent, Megan Bayne. And then after that, of course, after that match, the Hurt Syndicate came out, or 2/3 of the Hurt Syndicate on MVP and Bobby Lashley came out. Initially, they were going to try to cut a promo, but they were initially confronted by MJF, who MVP has been wanting to recruit for the Hurt Syndicate, but of course, Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley have been a little wary of the idea, considering MJF's history. Now, mind you, Shelton Benjamin unfortunately missed last night's show due to the fact that I guess he was held up by the weather. He was held up back in his home of Orangeburg, South Carolina, the tornadoes, I guess, where they're saying that's why he wasn't able to make it last night. But, he came out and MJF came out to confront, MVP and Bobby Lashley. And it's like everybody was joking about how kind of stupid MJF was being, because it seems like he's trying to purposely get under the skin of Bobby Lashley, and it's just not going to seem to fly, as it were. Let's see now. Let's see as we continue. So after MJF left the ring, then Hurt Syndicate were confronted once again by Big Bill and Brian Keith of the Learning Tree. After getting chewed out by Chris Jericho over their lack of success, they confronted the Hurt Syndicate to challenge them for the shot at the AEW World Tag Titles, only for Hurt Syndicate to sit there and shoo them away, say, well, why don't you guys go beat somebody first, then we'll talk. It's like, and of course that led to their match against Top Flight on Saturday, which of course led to which then led to another confrontation tonight where they beat their opponents in a jobber team in very quick fashion with a minute 23. And as they were coming to the ring, they were confronting Lashley and MVP. They basically told him, "Hey, take a seat and watch us." And because of all that, the match has been signed for Sunday's Dynasty, of course, in which the Hurt Syndicate of Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley will be defending AEW World Tag Titles against Big Bill and Brian Keith of the Learning Tree. That match did, in fact, get signed. And following that, you had another tag team match in which Kevin Knight and Will Ospreay teamed up to take on Blake Christian and Lee Johnson. It was announced earlier in the evening that Kevin Knight and Will Ospreay would be facing each other in the quarterfinal round of the Owen Hart tournament. Of course, Knight and Ospreay did beat Christian and Johnson, and it was announced that their quarterfinal match will happen this Sunday at Dynasty. So both of the first quarterfinal matches, the first men's quarterfinal match, the first women's quarterfinal match, were announced on last night's Dynamite as Kevin Knight and Will Ospreay will be taking each other on in the quarterfinals of the Owen Hart Cup, and then also Harley Cameron and Mercedes Moné will also be facing each other Sunday in the first women's quarterfinal match of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Now, mind you, prior to that, of course, on Saturday's Collision, was also announced on last night's Dynamite that Mercedes Moné and Harley Cameron will be teaming up against Athena, Ring of Honor World Champion Athena, and Julia Hart on this Saturday's edition of Collision. So that's all coming up soon. Following all that, Brody King defeated Lance Archer. It was also announced early in the evening that Brody King would be facing Konosuke Takeshita in the first round of the Owen Hart tournament. So I guess what happened here was that Don Callis decided to send his big man out to try to take out Brody King, only for the one half of the Hounds of Hell to defeat Lance Archer in just over 10.5 minutes. And the main event of the evening saw Cope defeat Claudio Castagnoli in what could be considered a precursor to Sunday's AW Trios title match, in which Cope will be teaming up with FTR of Dax Harwood, Cash Wheeler, as rated FTR, to take on the Death Riders of Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, and Pac. Of course, there does seem to be some friction going on, as it would appear that Harwood has been allowing his emotions to get the better of him, his frustrations the best of him, which has led to some tense confrontations between him, Wheeler, and Cope. So we'll just have to wait and see how all that plays out this Sunday. So with that, that's all that happened on last night's Dynamite. So now let's take a quick peek at what to look forward on tonight's Impact and Ring of Honor. As first up on tonight's Ring of Honor show, coming from the UW Milwaukee Panther Arena in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with commentary provided by Caprice Coleman and Ian Riccaboni. You will see the infantry of Carly Bravo and Shane Taylor Promotions, the infantry, taking on the Dark Order of Alex Reynolds and Evil Uno. In a Ring of Honor World Tag Team Proving Ground match, the Sons of Texas, Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara, will be taking on the Frat House of Cole Carter and Griff Garrison, with Jack Jameson and Preston Vance in their corner. The Outrunners take on the Premier Athletes. Outrunners Turbo Floyd and Truth Magnum taking on the Premier Athletes of Aria Davari and Tony Nese, with Mark Sterling in their corner. Another tag team match, the Gates of Agony, Bishop Khan and Tora Leona, take on the duo of Cal Bloom, the son of Wayne, of course, the second generation wrestler, son of former AWA World Tag Team Champion Wayne Bloom, as well as another one of his alter egos, Bo Beverly of the Beverly Brothers, and Dion Rushman. In a six-man, would be a lucha libre style match. Kevin Knight, Rocky Romero, and Volador Jr. team up to take on Máscara Dorada, Templario, and Titan. And then we'll also see in a peer title match, Lee Moriarty defends the peer title against AR Fox. So that's all that's happening on tonight's Ring of Honor show. Now, looking ahead to tonight's Impact, as we're 2 weeks away from the Unbreakable event coming up 2 weeks from tonight, heading into WrestleMania weekend, and then 10 days after that, of course, is the Rebellion pay-per-view. On tonight's Impact, with Matthew Rainwalt and Tom Hannafin on commentary, two-time TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champions Spitfire, Danny Luna, and Jody Threat take on NXT's Metaphor of Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. Frankie Kazarian takes on Elijah in a one-on-one match. Steve Macklin will be challenging the System's Eddie Edwards in a singles match. And then in a 6-woman tag match, you have on one side TNA Knockouts champion Masha Slamovich teaming with Li Yingling and Zaya Brookside to take on Fatal Influence members JC Jane and Jasmine Nix, and Tessa Blanchard with Fallon Henley in their corner. So that's all we got for the wrestling wrap-up. So now, with that being said, with today, of course, being Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025, let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. History! So, first off, we're going to head back 60 years ago. And on this date, 60 years ago, as soon as we pull this up, of course, on this date, 60 years ago today, back in 1965, Eagle Films and United Screen Arts, The Man from Button Willow, premiered in theaters on this date um, back in the animated film The Man from Button Willow premiered in movie theaters on this date um, back in 1965, 60 years ago today. The Man from Button Willow is a 1965 American animated Western film about the adventures of Justin Eagle, the first U.S. government agent. It was released in the United States on April 3rd, 1965. So this is basically a Western that was done back 60s. So now, with that, let's move on to the next piece of move on to the next piece of Nietzsche history here. Moving ahead to the year 2000. So I pull this up here. On this date in the year 2000, the day after WrestleMania, WWE held its Monday Night Raw event from the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. The event, of course, the main event saw The Rock defeat Shane McMahon in a singles match. Among some of the other notable matches included Kurt Angle defeating Val Venus in just over 4 minutes. The Big Show defeating Rikishi Fatu by DQ with Grandmaster Sexy and Howdy Do Hotty in his corner. And the show opened up with a WWF European Championship title match, in which Eddie Guerrero defeated Chris Jericho to become the European champion on the show. So that's kind of what that happened. And the year 2000 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. As also on this date in the year 2000, so I pull it up here. Also on this date in the year 2000, Gonzo's Gatekeepers premiered on WoW on this date back in the Gatekeepers anime premiered on this date. It's based on a game on WoW on this date back in 2000. So on this date, 25 years ago today, the Gonzo's Gatekeepers anime premiered on WoW on Japanese television, as it were. Let's see now. Now, to finish things off, moving ahead to 2019, 6 years ago today, on this date, 6 years ago today in 2019. The 5th issue of B&V Friends Forever went on sale on newsstands on this date back in 2019. It was an Archie comic featuring, of course, Betty and Veronica. So on this date back in 2019, Archie's B&V Friends Forever number 5 went on sale on newsstands on this date back in 2019. It sold for $2.99 with 20 pages. With the stories included Catnapped, Shelter Skelter, Walking the Dogs, and Reptile Rendezvous. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here tomorrow with more Nichins. Of course, Sunday we'll be back here on Sunday. As Rick Piper will be my co-host, we'll be continuing our look back to comics that went on sale in May of 1940. This week we'll be looking at comics on sale from Centaur. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here on tomorrow. Bye.